against the creation of a special UN brigade which will be mandated to fight armed groups in the country's restive eastern region. Kabila claims that these foreign troops will drive out the M23. What he really wants to do is to sell our country, sell our wealth to the whites. That is what he wants. In an open letter, the M23 warned of a humanitarian catastrophe should the UN attempt to deploy troops in the region. The rebels have no intention of letting them do so. This time it concerns a planned war which will bring about a humanitarian crisis planned by the highest authorities of the United Nations. And we think it's best that UN aid workers separate themselves from the consequences so that they can take care of the people. Despite these threats, the UN said it would go ahead with the intervention force and understood what it was up against. We will not be told what to do or how to react because of the opinions of certain people, especially those of armed groups who are the cause of this insecurity. The humanitarian situation continues to deteriorate in the country's east. The population has suffered from the proliferation of armed groups, foreign intervention, and an undisciplined Congolese army.
The United States and its allies, South Korea, have been busy carrying out series of military drills in recent times in the wake of threats by North Korea. But results of a recent simulation exercise by United States forces have raised a lot of questions as to whether Washington is prepared for such a scenario. For more on that, let's turn our attention to this report by CNN's Jane Tapa.
Imagine this. The North Korean regime is toppled, either because the U.S. or South Korea take it out or because of a coup, and the U.S. now has to surge troops to secure the country's nuclear stockpiles to make sure they don't fall into the wrong hands. It's a frightening scenario played out recently at the U.S. Army War College, one that did not end all that well. The military set the scene for their war game in the fictitious land of North Brownland, essentially an alias for North Korea.
It was a family regime that had nuclear weapons, lost control of nuclear weapons. The population was considered to be essentially brainwashed.
Paul McCleary, a writer for Defense News, was present as the military officials debated the plans. U.S. troops, he says, had immediate problems surging into the North Korea-like country. V-22 Ospreys zoom U.S. soldiers deep beyond the border, but with reinforcements so far behind, they're quickly surrounded by the enemy and need to be pulled out. American troops eventually make it over the border, but with nuclear sites located in populated areas, their mission grows more difficult. U.S. forces make humanitarian aid drops to draw people out of the cities.
And they made the game as difficult as possible to really test their capabilities. They haven't really spent a lot of time or money modernizing their nuclear and chemical troops. So that's a big concern.
It takes the U.S. a staggering 56 days and a huge force of 90,000 troops to secure the country's nuclear weapons, seen by many as way too long and way too many troops.
We're not very well prepared to deal with a collapsed North Korea.
North Korea expert Bruce Bennett says his numbers for containing the regime's nuclear arsenal run much higher, 200,000 troops. That's larger than the forces in Iraq and Afghanistan at its peak.
We would have to send perhaps a third of our army to South Korea in order to deal with the weapons of mass destruction.
It's thought that North Korea has 100 sites linked to their nuclear and missile program, but with a black tarp shrouding intelligence on the locations, U.S. troops would likely have to fight their way through the country to find and secure them.
North Korea has about 1.2 million people in the military. That's a very large military for us to deal with. But they also have, according to the South Korean Defense Ministry, about 200,000 special forces. And those special forces would be prepared to fight you like Taliban or the Iraqi insurgents.
Of course, the Army was quick to remind us that the fictional North Brownland might not be North Korea expressly, but any one of the 28 countries that have weapons of mass destruction capabilities. Jake Tapper, CNN, Washington.
Second break, we'll be right back. And before we end this edition of the news, a reminder of our headlines. Movers and shakers in the Gambia's fashion industry have outlined their intention to support President Jammeh's 1,101 hospital bed initiative as Vice President Jaisidi unveils Designer Touch 2013. Experts from the Finance and Economic Affairs Ministry and partners have convened a high-level consultative meeting on the post-2015 development agenda. The leader of the M23 rebels has warned the United Nations against the deployment of troops in Eastern DRC, but the UN says it will not be bought by the opinion of perpetrators of insecurity in the DR Congo's restive region. And former Pakistani strongman Pervez Musharraf has returned home, but his bid for another political comeback is beset by a myriad of obstacles. That's all in this edition of the news. Thanks for watching. Join us at 10 for another bulletin. Meanwhile, enjoy our programs.
Namori moo takk ndeysaan ngeen bu nubu noonu Seydou Keita moo takk ngeen bu nu weex li waaye li ma leen bëgg a xamal rek mooy premier combat ngi noonu si compétition bi muy diggante Namori ak Seydou Keita waxtu wi ñoom ñaar lewaatoo jeex na ñu ngi jàppante ku nekk nga téye sa morom Namori am na nu mu doon waaye Seydou na ko déedéet parce que ndeysaan amuñ doole waaye technique mu ngi si bëri muy premier combat bi nga xam ne ndeysaan si arène nationale bi nga xam ne moom lañ jagleel Gambia Rasuli Association tey nag muy opening bi muy bés bi nga xam ne ndeysaan lewaatoo képp koo xam ne yaa ngi yëngu si lamb war naa gërëm ñi nga xam ne ñooy lewaatoo parce que ndeysaan fu lamb nekk ñu indi leen diggante Namori ak Seydou jox ñu gannaaw amee ngeen lu weex Namori jox ñu kanam ñoom ñaar lewaatoo jeex na ku nekk ngi téye sa morom mbagam ak ngeen waaye ndax jël bi dina sotti ndax du sotti léegi tey mbokk yi premier combat ngi noonu ngeen si ànd seen xarit seen doomi ndey Matar Sène ak Linguère nekkal la ci wàllu communauté tub waaye ndeysaan Seydou Keita ak Namori ñu ngi puusante Namori mu ngi ko jaay doole waaye Seydou du ko jaay xel ndeysaan Seydou Keita Namori daanal na Seydou Keita jël bi set na leer na amul weerante loolu
taka der yaa fi seen bopp bu defee moom la ñu bàyyi ko rek wax ko loo xam ci bëgg ngay
alhamdulillah it's my first time to join the Gambia Wrestling Association. IGP Sonko Mama nominate to represent the Gambia Police Force to Gambia Wrestling Association. So whatever wrestling be full money health security muna tewe muna protect here am fofunono ak ñi indi seen moto yi dafa gaare moom ko avoid sàccay de am ko loolu kontaan naa trop gërëm ko ci jéego yu jël pour def ma foofu noonu te maa ngi ñaan kente lay kàttan yàlla dimbale ma fulfill moom it pros bu mu am pour jooma ko ma def ko ci Gambia Wrestling Association gannaaw loolu Matar Jaaju tamit nekk na njiit moo xam ne dafa sawar trop bu dee bëccëg mu ñoo dajale mu ñoo waxal li ñu war a def mu ñoo waxal li ñu war a def mu ñoo advice pour ñu respect doomi aadama ñi ñëw ci bëre bi parce que bëre bi soo ko déggee mbir yi ñoo tax ñuy wax bëre soo mbir yi tamit il faut ñu respect leen gannaaw loolu ñuy génnee seen xaalis di fay yow seetaan mbir bi